most dangerous lies are the ones you don't speak. They live in the pauses, in the justifications, in the silent agreements you make with yourself when no one's watching. I'm fine. It's not that bad. She'll change. I'll deal with it later. This is just how life is. You say these things not because you believe them, but because believing the truth would require action. And action is terrifying, because action means risk. It means disruption. It means you might lose the very things you've convinced yourself you need to survive. So you lie. You lie with a smile. You lie with discipline. You lie by showing up to a life that doesn't feel like yours, wearing a mask you've convinced, even yourself, is real. You work the job. You play the role. You love the woman. You follow the path. All while your soul keeps whispering, "This isn't it." But you silence it. You call it weakness. You call it immaturity. You call it just being grateful. But it's not gratitude. It's fear. Fear of what would happen if you burned the illusion. Fear of what you'd be left with if everything false fell away. Because deep down, you've built your identity on top of compromises. You've confused endurance with purpose. You've called survival strength. You've turned numbness into wisdom. But here's what happens when a man finally stops lying to himself. He doesn't get angry. He gets clear. And clarity destroys everything that can't survive the truth. You've told yourself for years that you're holding it together, that what you feel is just stress, that being off is normal, that other men probably feel the same way. You've become a master of pretending that okay is enough. You laugh at the right moments. You show up. You play the part. And when no one's around, you numb out. With noise, distraction, dopamine, scrolling, sex, food, achievement, anything to avoid the one voice that never lies to you, your own, the voice that whispers at 2 a.m., the one that speaks after the movie ends, after the drink wears off, after the orgasm fades. It says, "This isn't who you are." And you know it's right. You know that underneath the routines and the roles, you've drifted from the man who once moved with fire, the one who had edge, clarity, conviction, the one who didn't live for convenience or comfort. But somewhere along the way, you traded fire for function. You told yourself you had to. You told yourself this is what growing up means. You lied. You lied because truth requires consequences. Because if you admitted you were off course, you'd have to turn around. You'd have to walk away from people who call your numbness stability. You'd have to disappoint the ones who fell in love with your mask. You'd have to destroy everything that was built on the lie. And so you delay. You wait for a better moment, a better sign, a better reason. But the only reason you need is already inside you. You can't keep living like this. And the moment you admit that not to her, not to them, but to yourself, that's the moment the real war begins. Not outside, inside, between the man you've pretended to be and the one who's finally ready to come home. There's a version of you still alive, buried beneath the persona, the patterns, the expectations. He's not polished. He's not perfect, but he's real. You used to hear him when you walked away from people who disrespected you without needing to explain, when you laughed without checking if it was too loud, when you moved with fire, not for attention, but because your soul was lit. He wasn't afraid to speak truth. to say no without a smile, to walk alone without calling it loneliness, to stand still in silence and feel complete. But over time, you buried him under roles, under relationships, under responsibilities that weren't yours to carry, under shame. Because this world doesn't reward men for being true. It rewards them for being useful, controllable, digestible. So you adapted. You put on the face. You softened the edge. You swallowed the scream and replaced it with a sentence that sounded socially correct. And slowly, you started dying. Not dramatically, silently, in small ways, in the way your shoulders rounded, in the way your eyes stopped holding contact, in the way you woke up tired even after sleep. Because the weight of pretending isn't light. It crushes you slowly, until all that's left is a man who can't even remember what he's suppressing. But here's the moment that matters. You stop running. You sit with it. The regret, the resentment, the dull ache of knowing you've betrayed yourself in the name of being liked. And you say, no more. Not to her, not to them, to you. And suddenly, everything shakes. Because truth doesn't come with applause. It comes with consequences. And once it's spoken, the man you used to be starts dying. So the man you were born to be can finally rise. Rebuilding doesn't start with a plan. It starts with demolition. You don't change your life by adding new routines. You change your life by tearing down everything that was built on the lie. The lie that said, keep the peace. Don't rock the boat. She'll leave if you stop performing. You're lucky to even be here. Number. Now, you start burning. You burn the relationships that require your silence. You burn the jobs that suffocate your purpose. You burn the conversations where your presence is tolerated, not respected. You burn the masks. And yes, it hurts. Because when you stop lying to yourself, you lose more than people. You lose identity, the false self that got applause, the version that fit the narrative, the man who made everyone else comfortable, while dying slowly on the inside. But make no mistake, this is sacred fire. This is truth doing its job. It doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. And now, you feel raw, exposed, alone, but not weak. Because for the first time, your loneliness is clean. It's not guilt-ridden. It's not built on hiding. It's yours. And that stillness? That's the ground. The real ground. Not the illusion you stood on before. Not the fragile balance of people-pleasing and emotional suppression. This is the beginning of foundation. And the man who rises from that place, he won't need motivation. He won't need permission. He won't need a mirror to remember who he is. He will know. Because he's been to the bottom of himself and didn't flinch. You stop looking for rescue. You stop waiting for signs. You stop praying that someone, anyone, will finally see your pain and offer you a way out. Because now you understand. No one's coming. And that's not a tragedy. That's the moment you become a leader. Not of others, of yourself. You start speaking differently, not louder, sharper. Every word has weight because you're no longer trying to convince. You're stating what is. You no longer tell yourself, I'll try. You say, this is what happens next. You don't ask, do I deserve more? You declare, I'm done tolerating less. This isn't confidence. This is alignment. You've spent years negotiating your power. Now you've repossessed it. Quietly. Internally. No need to explain. No need to argue. No need to prove. Because proof is for people still living in doubt. You've been through the fire. You've watched the old self burn. You've felt the grief of letting him go. And in the ashes, you found something unshakable. Direction. Now your movements are precise. Your standards? Non-negotiable. Your silence? Heavy. People feel it. She feels it. The world adjusts to it. Because once a man leads himself, he becomes immune to manipulation. He no longer leaks energy trying to be understood. He no longer hands out access just because someone asks nicely. And that, right there, that's how you start to rebuild a life worth living. Not by being louder, but by becoming undeniable. There comes a moment when you realize you don't miss the old life. You don't miss the people who needed you to stay small. You don't miss the version of you who was easy to love because he never said no. You look back, and there's no pull, only clarity. Because now you know. You were never afraid of being alone. You were afraid of being seen alone, afraid of the judgment, afraid of losing the illusion, afraid of standing in full view of the world with no mask to hide behind. But now, the fear's gone. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped flinching at silence. You stopped chasing validation. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never cared about the answer. You're not angry. You're not defensive. You're not cold. You're just unreachable. Not because you built walls, but because the old access points are gone. They were burned in the fire with your excuses. And those who try to come back, the ones who loved you most when you needed them the most, they feel it. That shift, that distance, that depth they once couldn't see beneath your people-pleasing smiles. Now they say, you're different. You've changed. You don't care like you used to. And they're right. You don't care like that because you no longer abandon yourself just to be understood. You no longer trade your peace for connection. You no longer stay somewhere your soul doesn't recognize. You don't explain. You don't soften. You don't slow down. Because once a man stops lying to himself, he stops giving the world versions of himself just to make other people comfortable. He doesn't burn bridges. He becomes the fire. The world sees solitude as emptiness. They say, don't isolate yourself. Stay connected. Keep people close. But a man who's finally stopped lying to himself, he doesn't fear the silence. He wears it like a crown. Because he knows most people aren't company. They're just noise. He no longer surrounds himself out of fear of loneliness. Because now he understands. Loneliness was never the problem. Self-abandonment was. You can be in a room full of people and feel hollow. You can be in bed beside someone and feel unseen. You can have 100 notifications, and not one of them is real connection. So now, he chooses solitude. Not because he hates people, but because he refuses to dilute himself to be accepted by the crowd. In solitude, a man rebuilds his instincts. He listens to thoughts that used to terrify him. He sits in the discomfort he used to escape. He finds peace in his presence, not because it's perfect, but because it's his. This is where the shift locks in. No audience, no mirror, no applause, just stillness. And in that stillness, clarity sharpens into conviction. You no longer wonder, Am I good enough? I am what I decide to become. You no longer ask, will they stay? You ask, do they align with who I'm becoming? And those who don't, they fall away. Not because you pushed them, because gravity doesn't beg. It just pulls. And now, you are gravity, not for others, for yourself. A man who walks alone, but never drifts, who stands still, but never stalls, who speaks little, but his presence is felt, because in solitude, he didn't find pain. He found the throne. You step back into the world, not with noise, not with announcement, but with weight. People feel it before they hear it. The way you walk, the way you pause before speaking, the way your no longer needs explanation. You're not bitter. You're not defensive. You just don't negotiate your soul anymore. They try to talk to the old version of you, the one who used to smile through disrespect, the one who used to over-explain, the one who tried to stay nice to keep things peaceful. But he's gone. And in his place, someone simpler, stronger. Still, now you move differently. You don't explain why you're unavailable. You simply are. You don't justify your boundaries. You enforce them with silence. You don't seek validation. You embody value. People start to notice. Some admire it. Some resent it. Some try to test it. But they all feel the same thing. You don't need them to like you. And that terrifies people, because most of the world is built on mutual insecurity. I need your approval, so I'll behave a certain way. You need mine, so you'll validate my behavior. But when you cut that contract, when you move through the world centered, non-reactive, and unbothered, you become uncontrollable. That's not rebellion. That's sovereignty. You no longer ask, how do I fit in? You ask, what needs to be built now that I'm here? And when people say, you've changed, you don't flinch. You don't smile. You don't try to make them comfortable. You just say, finally. Because when a man stops lying to himself, he doesn't go back to anything. He becomes the future. You don't need a clean slate. You just need the courage to write truth on what's left. And now, you build. Slow, deliberate, unshakable. You start with your environment. You strip the noise. Unfollow, delete, walk away. Not from hate, from clarity. Every item you own, every person you allow in your space, either reflects your values or it weakens your structure. There is no middle anymore. Then you move to your habits, not to be better, to be aligned. Because now, you don't chase dopamine. You chase discipline. Not to prove anything, but because freedom without structure is still a cage. And then comes your voice. No more speaking just to fill silence. Now, every word you say has edge, has presence, has the weight of someone who's finally stopped performing. This is when the world starts noticing. They say, you're intense. You're too direct. You've changed. And for the first time ever, you don't soften your delivery to make them stay. You speak, you move, you live, as if your life is your own. Because it finally is. You've built something that can't be stolen, can't be manipulated, can't be rebranded. And when others try to fit into this new world of yours, you don't say yes because you're lonely. You say yes because they're aligned. That's leadership, not influence. Filter. You don't gather followers. You attract equals. Because once a man stops lying to himself, he doesn't lead with charm. He leads with clarity. There's no audience anymore, no spotlight, no stage, just you, standing where the mask finally slipped, where the pretending stopped, where the silence became sacred. And now, you see yourself, not the version you edited for love, not the one you built to be accepted, not the shadow that got applause for being agreeable. You, sharp, honest, flawed, undeniable. And in that stillness, you finally understand. The world didn't betray you. She didn't break you. Life didn't abandon you. You betrayed yourself. With every fake smile, with every yes you didn't mean, with every I'm fine that buried your truth deeper. But that's over now. Not because it's healed, because it's done. And when they come back, when she says, "You've changed," when they ask, "What happened to you?" you don't defend. You don't explain. You don't shrink. You look them in the eye and say, "I stopped lying to myself, and everything that couldn't survive the truth died with the lie." Then you walk, not to escape, not to disappear, but to begin. Because when a man stops lying to himself, he doesn't just find peace, he finds power. The kind that doesn't shake, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that builds empires in silence.